There is a stretch of water between Iran and Oman that is 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. 33 kilometers. You could drive that in 20 minutes. And right now, 20% of all the oil on Earth passes through it. Every single day. That's 17 million barrels a day. Every barrel of oil that Saudi Arabia exports goes through here. Every barrel from Kuwait, the UAE, Iraq, Qatar. Japan gets 80% of its oil through this strait. South Korea gets 70%. China gets about 40%. If this waterway closes, not for a year, not for a month, just for 2 weeks, the global economy goes into cardiac arrest. Iran knows this. Iran has known this for 40 years. They have missiles pointed at it. They have submarines in it. They have speedboats that swarm around tankers. They have mines. And they have threatened to close it multiple times. The question everybody keeps asking, and nobody fully answers, is what actually happens if they do it? Today, we're going to answer that question, day by day, country by country. And by the end of this, you will understand why this 33-kilometer stretch of water might be the single most important piece of geography on the planet. Let me give you the actual numbers so you feel the size of this. The Strait of Hormuz handles about 20 to 21 million barrels of oil per day. That's roughly 1/5 of global oil consumption. But it's not just oil. About 3.5 trillion cubic feet of liquefied natural gas passes through here every year. Qatar, which is basically the Saudi Arabia of natural gas, exports nearly all of it through the strait. Qatar supplies gas to the UK, Germany, France, Italy, Japan, South Korea. Block the strait, and you don't just cut oil, you cut heat and electricity for large parts of Europe and Asia simultaneously. Now here's something most people don't realize. There is no good alternative route. The pipelines that bypass the strait can handle maybe 4 to 5 million barrels a day. The strait moves 20 million. There's a Saudi pipeline that goes to the Red Sea, maximum capacity around 5 million barrels. There's a UAE pipeline that can move about 1.5 million. That's it. That's all the alternatives. And the Global Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the emergency stockpile the US and other countries maintain, buys you about 90 days. Maybe. 90 days before the tanks are empty and the numbers get really ugly. So what actually happens? Let's go day by day. Day 1. Iran either mines the strait, sinks a ship in the channel, or declares a naval exclusion zone. Within hours, every oil tanker in the region stops moving. Insurance companies immediately suspend coverage for vessels attempting to transit. No insurance, no shipping company will send a ship. The oil stops. Not gradually, immediately. Oil futures markets open in London and New York. The price of oil goes vertical. During the 1973 Arab oil embargo, a much smaller supply disruption, oil prices quadrupled in 3 months. Analysts who have modeled a strait closure estimate prices could hit $200 to $250 a barrel within days. Some models say higher. In 2024, oil was trading around $80 a barrel. 3 times that is $240. Gasoline prices in the US go from roughly $3.50 to potentially $8 or $9 per gallon within a week. Day 3. Japan goes into emergency mode first. Japan has almost no domestic oil. It imports 80% of its oil through the strait. It has about 90 days of reserves, but the psychological shock hits the economy immediately. Japanese manufacturers start rationing energy. Toyota, Honda, Sony, the factories start cutting production hours. The Nikkei stock market falls 15% in a single session. Day 5. South Korea, which gets 70% of its oil through the strait, declares a national energy emergency. South Korea is also where a huge percentage of the world's ships are built and where global semiconductor manufacturing is clustered. Samsung, SK Hynix, the chips that go into every smartphone, laptop, and car on Earth are made here. When Korean factories start rationing power, the global semiconductor supply chain starts to wobble. Day 7. India, which imports about 60% of its oil through the strait, starts experiencing fuel shortages at retail level. India has 1.4 billion people. Fuel queues appear at petrol stations across the country. Trucking starts to break down. Food supply chains, which depend on trucking, start to strain. When food supply chains strain in a country of 1.4 billion people, the political consequences are immediate and severe. Week 2. China. China gets about 40% of its oil through the strait. It has larger strategic reserves than most countries, but 40% is still an enormous number when you're the world's largest manufacturer. China's factories start slowing. Chinese exports, which supply basically everything in your home, start backing up. The global supply chain, which was already fragile after COVID, starts breaking again. Week 2 also brings a different kind of crisis. Shipping companies start routing tankers the long way, around the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa. That adds about 15 days to the journey each way, which means 30 extra days per round trip, which means the effective global tanker fleet just got dramatically smaller because every ship is at sea much longer. The ships that were supplying Japan in 30 days now take 45. The shortage deepens even as the strait sits there, technically closable by anyone brave enough to try. Week 3. Europe. Europe gets less oil through the strait than Asia, maybe 20%, but Europe gets a lot of its liquefied natural gas from Qatar through the strait. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Europe spent years desperately diversifying away from Russian gas. Much of that diversification went toward Qatari LNG, which now can't move. Germany, Europe's industrial engine, starts implementing rolling industrial shutdowns. BASF, Volkswagen, Siemens, the manufacturers that supply the world, go to reduced operations. The German economy, already struggling, tips into severe recession. France, Italy, Spain follow. European unemployment starts climbing. Month 1. The global economy is in full crisis. GDP growth across every major economy is negative. Stock markets worldwide are down 30 to 40%.
Okay, so here's where people usually say, just open it by force. The U.S. Navy is right there. And yes, the U.S. Fifth Fleet is based in Bahrain, 200 miles from the strait. The U.S. has aircraft carriers, destroyers, minesweepers in the region at all times, but opening the strait militarily is not as simple as it sounds, not even close. Iran has spent 40 years specifically preparing to make the strait as difficult as possible for the U.S. Navy to operate in. They have hundreds of anti-ship missiles, including the Noor and Qatar missiles that can hit a ship from 200 kilometers away, fired from mobile launchers hidden in the Zagros Mountains. You can't take out mobile launchers from a carrier group. You'd need a ground campaign. In Iran, which has 85 million people and a terrain designed by God to make invaders miserable. They also have hundreds of fast attack boats, small, fast, armed with rockets and torpedoes that swarm around larger vessels. The U.S. Navy calls this the Hornet threat. A $4 billion aircraft carrier is vulnerable to a $500,000 speedboat carrying the right weapon. That asymmetry is exactly what Iran has built its strategy around. And mines. Iran has a large stockpile of naval mines, some of them sophisticated enough to activate only when a specific type of ship passes over. Clearing a minefield from the strait could take weeks, under fire. But here's the deeper twist. Closing the strait would also hurt Iran. Iran exports its own oil through the strait. Closing it cuts Iran's revenue too. Iran's economy is already under enormous sanction pressure. It can't absorb that easily. So, why would they do it? This is the key question, and the answer tells you everything about Iran's actual strategy. Iran doesn't need to close the strait permanently to achieve its goal. It just needs to threaten to close it. Every time tension rises between Iran and the US or Israel, every time sanctions tighten or an Iranian nuclear scientist gets assassinated, oil prices spike because markets price in the risk of closure. Iran gets paid more for its oil every time it rattles the strait. The threat itself is the weapon. But there's a scenario where the threat becomes real, and it's not Iran deciding to close it in a calm strategic calculation, it's escalation. A US or Israeli strike on Iranian nuclear facilities. Iran retaliates by mining the strait. The US responds militarily. Iran escalates further. Each step feels rational from inside. The combination is catastrophic. There's also the wild card of Iranian proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Shia militias in Iraq. In 2024, the Houthis, an Iranian-backed militia in Yemen, started attacking commercial shipping in the Red Sea with drones and missiles. That alone added billions to global shipping costs and rerouted hundreds of vessels. The Strait of Hormuz plus the Red Sea simultaneously, which Iran could potentially engineer through its proxy network, would be an entirely different level of crisis.
So what do we actually learn from all of this? First, the global economy is more fragile than most people realize. One 33-kilometer waterway, that's the margin. The entire industrial civilization, the factories, the heating, the food supply chains, the semiconductor supply, all of it ultimately depends on oil and gas moving freely through one narrow channel. Second, this is why energy transition actually matters for national security, not just climate. Every solar panel installed, every electric vehicle on the road, every offshore wind farm, each one reduces the percentage of national energy that has to flow through the strait. Japan building more nuclear plants and solar farms is not just an environmental choice, it's a strategic defense against the Hormuz threat. Same for South Korea, same for Europe. Third, Iran's leverage here is not going away, it's actually growing. As long as the Gulf states keep producing oil, and as long as Asia keeps consuming it, the strait stays critical. Iran sits on the north shore of this choke point by geography. That's not changing. The nuclear deal, the JCPOA, was partly about reducing the temperature around the strait. Walking away from it without a replacement reduced every diplomatic tool for managing this risk. Fourth, the one thing that has kept the strait open is that closing it would start a war nobody in the region actually wants to fight to its conclusion. Iran doesn't want to be bombed back to rubble. The Gulf states don't want war on their doorstep. The U.S. doesn't want another Middle Eastern ground war. China doesn't want its oil cut off. Everyone has enormous incentives to keep that water moving. The strait has stayed open because closing it would be catastrophic for everyone, including Iran. But mutual deterrence only works until it doesn't, until someone miscalculates, until a regional war spills over, until an Iranian commander makes a decision his government didn't authorize. The strait has come close to closing before. In 1988, during the Iran-Iraq War, the U.S. and Iran fought what's called the Tanker War, both sides attacking shipping, the U.S. Navy and Iran's Navy in actual combat. It didn't close then, but it came close. 33 kilometers of water, 20% of the world's oil, one country sitting on the northern shore with 40 years of missiles pointed at it. This is the most important piece of geography on Earth that most people couldn't find on a map. The next time you see a headline about Iran and the Strait, or fill up your tank and wonder why gas prices just jumped, you'll know exactly why. It's that 33 kilometers. It's always that 33 kilometers. Subscribe. Watch out for my next video. See you then.